honestly, even to this day, I don't feel there's anything special about me at all. All I've got is a moral compass and a backbone, and I wasn't prepared. You know, all the other undertakers see what I see, let me tell you, but I thought that when I spoke out, that they would all say, well, yeah, we're seeing that, and it would stop, and it never. And the irony is, I've had loads of them come up to me and say, oh, well done, you know, even at the local crematorium, tap me on the shoulder, just as I finished my funeral. All right, mate, yeah, well done for speaking out. It needed to be said, didn't it? I said, okay. I said, so why haven't you said anything then? Oh, well, and they look at the floor, don't look at the floor. When the doctors used to come in, doing cremation paperwork that was brought in after the Harold Shipman case, wasn't it? Do you remember the GP that was murdering people, wasn't he? With vitamin injections of morphine. It's still going on, it's never stopped. But they chose to make an example of him, which makes me think he may have been an innocent man with the level of justice we've got today. But they brought in this cremation paperwork, and the idea was that nobody could be cremated without individual checks, 2 individual doctors. And they abolished the first part at the beginning of COVID to protect the NHS, the people that were all clapping on doorsteps for us, they murdered your families and poisoned them with remdesivir and other delights. And for those of you who are not aware, I'll kind of skim over what I've probably told you 1,000 times, but there will be people here. Put your hands up if you've never listened to me speak. That's enough to warrant it, isn't it? So, COVID for me, as a funeral director, let me tell you a bit about myself first. So, I've been a funeral director for 18 years today. I was an engineer originally, because much like many kids, I didn't know what I wanted to do. School was boring. School was a social event because it was just boring. Nothing in there stimulated me in any way, shape or form. And I think if you're stimulated with something, you'll learn it a lot easier if you like what you're doing. Nothing at school made any sense to me, it was boring. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. My careers advice literally was on the Friday. My dad said, what are you going to do on Monday then? When I left school, I said, I don't know. He said, right, you're in with your uncle. And I started as a panel beater. And the reason for that, I guess, was because every toy that I had, I pulled it to bits to see how it worked. And inevitably, I'd put it back together and there'd be bits left. You know, spare parts, and it never worked. And so I've always had a curious mind and a curious nature, and I was an engineer. Anyway, I was an engineer all my life, and I ended up where I was working as a maintenance engineer for a plastics company. And it was basically making all of the bottles that you see on the shelf at Tesco's. So, you know, Lenore, Shake and Vac, milk bottles, you name it. And my job was to make sure everything run. And I'd managed to blag my way in there because I kind of knew the guy that worked there, and I never knew anything about these machines. But I had a curious nature. And so I was very fortunate in that these machines, there were like 10 of them. So if one broke and he said, number 9, stop working, I would look at number 8 and see what number 8 did, and then work out how to fix number 9 because it was an identical machine. And anyway, I got laid off, and I thought, what else can I do where I'm going to be out and about, and I'm not stuck in a factory, and I'm doing something really worthwhile. And more importantly, I had a mortgage at the time and a young son on the way that I'd never get laid off again. And of course, undertaking is a job for life, isn't it? Excuse the pun, but there's never going to be any shortage. It doesn't matter, Brexit, recession, global genocidal coals, you name it, it lends itself to my work. So I literally Googled all the local funeral directors, and I put a suit on. I got a covering letter. How do you write a covering letter to apply for a job as a funeral director when you're an engineer? I'm honest, I'm reliable, and because I had no relative experience. You know, I walked past a dead body once, but anyway, I knocked on doors and I managed to get in at the co-op. And I did 10 years with the co-op, and the first 5 years was good. I learned the trade, and by learning the trade, I mean I learned how to do a funeral, how to prepare a coffin, how to dress a deceased. They don't teach you how to care. That's something that you either have in you or you don't. You know, that could be a nurse on a ward. We see the difference in some of them, they care very much and they're very good. Others, they don't, they just go through the motions, and I think we haven't seen that any clearer than what we've seen over the last few years, have we? So, because I've showed an interest and I've always been a grafter, I've never ever not worked, I've never signed on, I wouldn't even know what to do. And I'm a worker. My dad said to me, if you don't work, you're out. And I never tested him because I knew I'd end up sitting on the curb with a bag full of clothes, you know. And that's kind of stood me in good stead. But anyway, the first 5 years were really good, and I learned the trade. And then the co-op bank collapsed, if you remember, those of you who showed interest in current affairs back then. And then they brought the money men into the co-op, and it was all about money. And I'll give you a typical example. Once a month, they would call us into an arranging room at the back of the house, and it would be sales figures, always pushing for sales, you know. Tell them you're going to do the best for their mum, and then show them our best coffin. That's the sort of thing that was pushed, and that's wrong. For cremation, why would I encourage you to spend £1,000 on an oak coffin to burn it? My dad said, put me in the green bin. He didn't care, and whilst I couldn't do that, I understood what he meant, and I go through life very much thinking that people are mirrors, aren't they? You know, much like a mirror, when you go through life, you look at people and they just reflect back what you put into them, like mirrors. And we're all mirrors, aren't we? You know, so that's the attitude that I take. And anyway, I wasn't happy working like that, so the second 5 years I was tucking away money and looking around for a suitable premises. It sounds a long time, 5 years, but it's only 260 weeks. Which isn't so long then, is it? No, that's how long this madness has been going on, isn't it, really? So I borrowed 35 grand, 25 grand was a personal loan, and 10 grand off my brother-in-law's sickeningly wealthy. So his mum and dad owned bingo halls, and he had the money tucked away. And then I opened my own funeral home, and purely on the template, really, of not trying to make as much money as I could. To me, that's not the definition of success. But being respected by your peers and the love of children and the love of animals, and that is what I deem as success. So COVID first for me, I mean, at the funeral home was open for 3-4 years before my first experience of COVID. And that first experience came in out of the blue in November, December of 2019. And the way that worked was I had a family come to me who'd lost a loved one, and for those of you who are not aware, I'm based in Milton Keynes. So if you do a search on Google and you type in the letters MK, for Milton Keynes, FFS, you'll see my website and where I am and who I am, and you know, I'm very keen to identify myself so that people can verify I am a funeral director and what I'm telling you is the truth, because without that validity, I'm just another internet, you know, nutcase. And I'm not, I am an undertone, I might be a nutcase. I've got a name of O Looney. So that was why I called it Milton Keynes Family Funerals and not O Looney and Son. But, so this family came to see me and they'd lost a loved one in the neighbouring borough of Northampton. Now I serve Northampton, Milton Keynes, Wellingborough, Bedford sometimes. I don't like going any further than kind of 30 miles because inevitably, if I'm serving you and it's your crematorium 30 miles away, one of the guarantees I have to make is that I will get there on time. And you know yourselves, it's not nice driving anywhere now. It's very difficult logistically to guarantee a family you can get there on time and you don't know the area. So anyway, Northampton, Bedford, that's about as far as I go. And they said they'd lost their loved one, it was a female, and they said that they were not happy because the mortuary wouldn't allow them to view that loved one in the chapel of rest. And for those of you that are unaware, every hospital has a mortuary, but people don't really think about it because they only like to think you go to the hospital to get better, not anymore. And if you walk around a hospital site and you wonder where that mortuary is, and inevitably you will after listening to what I said, always look for a big chimney, because that's where the incinerator is. What do they do with the incinerator? If you have a car accident and you lose a leg and it's amputated, they don't have a funeral for a leg. it's incinerated, along with soiled bandages and dirty sheets and blood-soaked this, and it's all in the incinerator. And the mortuary in the hospital was always a stone's throw from that incinerator. So look, where you see the chimney, that's where all the dead people are, sadly. So I said to this family, don't worry. I said, I'll go to the hospital promptly, because it's very important that you pick people up quickly, because if you do that, they're in the best condition. If they're in the best condition, you can present them nicer. That makes it nicer for the living, and it's a service to the living, isn't it? Not those that pass. So I always pick people up quick. And I went to the hospital and I said to the hospital staff, because I know him, why wouldn't you let this family view? And he didn't say anything, but he opened the door to the viewing room. The viewing room is next door to the mortuary. It's a room 16 by 16 square, enough to wheel one trolley in with one deceased on, and it's decked out like a funeral home viewing room. And he opened the door, and there was a big inflatable pandemic tent in there, and this was the first week of December of 2019. So I kind of said, well, what's that for? And I looked at the fridges, because the fridges are not full, so it's not overspill, you know, when they're lacking capacity. And he said, we've been told there's something very horrible coming. And he didn't use the word COVID, but he did say something horrible was coming. So, okay. So this deceased wasn't in that area, it was in the regular part. I breathed a sigh of relief, took them back home, to the funeral home, and the rest is history. You know, you kind of think, well, I've never known that happen before. That's never been said to me before as a funeral director. And I think I'd done about 14 years at that time. So I rang my mum, I rang my brother, and I rang my mate, and said, you know, I've been told this now. You might want to get some pasta in, or some, you know, what do you tell them? Do you get some bottled water? I don't know. The news broke in January of 2020, and we were shown pictures of people falling over in the street, weren't we, in China, collapsing, and they were saying how everybody was going to, every family would lose someone, Boris Johnson said. And I'll be honest with you, I was really frightened. You know, I'm a man who's clearly not a prime athlete. You know, I was in my early 50s at that time, ex-smoker, asthmatic. I was really worried. I was really worried. Now, if you go to the hospital and you pick up someone and they say to you, this person's got HIV or AIDS, this person's got tuberculosis, you are very careful with that deceased, because you understand there is a danger to you from that deceased. And here I was being charged with picking up all these people that have got this deadly disease that's going to kill us all, it's respiratory, and it was a pretty frightening time, the first 12, 16 weeks, I can tell you. And you know, you cast your mind back, whether you've been awake a lot longer than me, probably most of you have, I'm guessing, but I was fast asleep, I never knew, or just a professional undertaker. So I began picking these people up, and then their loved ones were coming to see me, and they were telling me how they'd lost their mum over a Zoom call, or standing there in a hazmat suit, and they would love to spend some time with their mum. And this was at a time when no other funeral directors was washing and dressing. Why were they doing that, I wonder? I think initially because they, same as me, they were worried. But in the end, when they clicked on, if you think about what I do as a funeral director, what does my job entail? People come to see me, I pick someone's loved one up, I wash them, I dress them, I present them for viewings, don't I? And I liaise with the family, I make the arrangements, I do the funeral on the day. It's me all the way through, well, me and my missus. So if somebody says, no, there's no viewing, it's too dangerous, COVID, but they're still charging the same money for after service, that's why all these funeral directors were happy to do it. So I was washing and dressing everyone all the way through, even when I didn't know COVID was real, you know, and I was very frightened. I woke up every morning, and you know that first moment you wake up and your brain engages, doesn't it, and you go, oh, I'm not sick yet, I'm not dying yet. That was kind of me for the first 3-4 months. You know, shit in the pants, waiting to get sick, and it never happened. And then in my office, there's wall planner. I have one for every year. And you have to get things right. It's really important that you get things right, as you'll appreciate, for obvious reasons. So I've got a foolproof man-designed system, because we don't multitask very well, I suppose. So I've got a wall planner, and I write down the names or the funeral dates, and I've got a whiteboard that's all gridded out, and I write it down there, and then I've got a folder for each individual as well. So I keep track of the funerals and they're counted. And it occurred to me that during this deadly pandemic, there were no more funerals than normal. So I began to wonder, well, are they just not ringing me? Or, you know, I'm not doing any more funerals than normal, what's going on? I couldn't understand. And I wasn't falling sick. And then I had a guy ring me in about March of 2020, and he introduced me. He said, "Hi, my name's John." He said, "I work for a government-sponsored company, and my job is to collate the numbers for the pandemic response." And I was like, cool, you know, and I still believed it. Doubts were creeping in, but I listened to what he had to say, and I said, "Well, what do you need to know? Why would you not want to engage with this man who tells you he's trying to help?" He said it was government-sponsored. So that means there's a government minister with a finger in the pie for this publicly funded company helping us with the pandemic effort. And he said, "I need to know a number of things. I'm going to call you every Monday. You're on my list." So there were clearly a number of funeral directors on his list, and that was his job, to ring them all. He said, "I need to know who you've picked up, where from, and how many have died from COVID." Questions you would want to know, wouldn't you? So I was happy to tell him, and every Monday this guy would ring up, and I was making an effort to get the detail down so that I could relay it to him on the Monday when he called. And it's amazing how you can get to know someone in a 2 or 3 minute conversation every Monday. John, his name was. Good solid name. And he would ring up and I would say, "Well, I picked up a guy from here, and a guy from here, and a guy from here." And the alarm bells rang because he started steering me straight away. Now, I had 7 years where I worked on the door. And I was always on the front door, because my thing is, if you don't let an arsehole in, they can't spoil the evening, can they? So I would fish for arseholes. And they would come in and go, "Evening lads, how are we doing? We're all right?" Just to get the response off them. So I'm good at weighing people up. And then once I've made my mind up, I can't be swayed, you know. And this guy tried to steer me, and I recognised that. And the way he did it was this. So I would say to him, and if you cast your mind back, this was when doctors stopped attending deaths. And we were told this was to protect the NHS, and this is why everyone's clapping every Thursday evening, weren't they? On doorsteps. The best psyop ever. I applaud the evil wickedness of that psyop, because it worked really well. It instilled hero worship into these people that were busy throwing things like remdesivir and putting people on ventilation who didn't need it and giving them morphine and killing them off. We were all clapping on doorsteps. So this guy, I said to him, "Right, I picked up a guy on Friday from this care home, Kent's Hill Care Home. He was an onset dementia patient. He'd been there 5 years. I know that because I spoke to the staff at the point of arrangement, and I was deliberately asking in order to get this information, knowing this job would bring me on the Monday." And he said, "Okay." And I said, then I met the family at the point of arrangement on the Monday. They all came in to see me. I said, "You know, what happened, what were the circumstances?" They said, "Yeah, he was in there for 5 years in the care home. He had onset dementia." 5 years is a long time. But quite often these people lose their mind, but they're physically very fit. And they're busy taking £5 a month out of their estate, aren't they? So they are often in these care homes for a long while. But they confirmed onset dementia. There was no doctor in attendance because we were protecting the NHS. And there was no COVID test done. So I was pretty confident this wasn't a COVID death, this was an onset dementia death. Straight away this guy openly admitted down the phone he was going to log it as a COVID death.
Thanks.
So I kind of I said, "Well, why, John? What is the point of you doing this if you're not going to log down the information that I'm giving you accurately? It's actually going to have the reverse effect and give the impression of a COVID death. Because it never occurred to me they were inflating the numbers." And he said, "Well, we've been told that one resident in this 90-bed care home had given a positive PCR test and then went on to die." He didn't die from COVID, he just gave a positive test and then went on to die. And we've been told from that moment, in March 2020, that everyone who dies in that care home is to be registered as a COVID death. Not only that, but they were paying thousands of pounds to the care home and the doctors every time COVID went on a death certificate. And I sat back and I was like, why the fuck have they monetised the pandemic? That makes no fucking sense. And then when you cast your mind back, think about it. How many TikTok dances did you see during a deadly pandemic where you've got dozens of NHS staff who are overrun, we're told, doing fucking well choreographed TikTok dances? And I sat there in disbelief, and I can tell you, during a deadly pandemic, when people, we're told, and you believe that people are fucking dying, you don't dance. You don't do well. I was shitting my pants as a funeral director. That isn't normal behaviour. Now we all see it on reflection, don't we? But the MK Ultra that they pulled on everyone with all these TikTok dances and clapping on the doorstep, that's fucking insanity. But people bought into it, didn't they? I'm pretty sure in the 1600s, when the Black Death was knocking about, people weren't dancing in the street. In fact, the very opposite. It was a miserable fucking time, and that's well documented. So, for me, that's another point when you cast your mind back, where I started seeing through the lies, seeing through the bullshit. And then it kind of got to October of that year, and I'd been dressing people and washing them. I even had other funeral directors sending people to me, families to me, because I was the only one that would wash and dress them. Okay, that's good for business, great, I'll take it. Because these people needed fucking looking after. They was betrayed by the NHS, they were betrayed, and these people know they betrayed them. Whether they did that through willful ignorance or willful blindness, I really don't know, but that's what happened. So it got to October, and this John in a phone call openly admits to me, he said, I don't know why I'm doing this job. And I said, well, what do you mean, John? He said, everyone is saying the exact same thing, meaning all the undertakers that he spoke to, there is no one dying from COVID. He openly admitted to that to me down the phone. So, and about 2 weeks after that, he then said, I'm not going to be calling anymore. And that was in end of October of 2020. A full 3 months, 2-3 months before they'd even rolled the vaccine, the miracle cure, before they'd even rolled it out. Why is there no need then? Had COVID stopped? Clearly not. What it was about was generating the COVID death numbers to convince the masses of the need for a cure. That's all that was about. And I think Rainer Fulmich is a German lawyer, political prisoner. He put it perfectly when he said the vaccines were never about COVID. COVID was about the vaccines. And look at the effort that was made. Look at all the people that were shut down and silenced and censored. Not nutty undertakers like me, but people with medical training, experts, that were censored and silenced, and yeah, it was a criminal act. But hopefully now we recognise this, other people will not fall for the same thing again. We'll see. It's going to be interesting, isn't it, when who rolls out the pandemic treaty and the sovereignty takeover. I predict that will be an interesting time for all of us. So I kind of knew by the end of 2020 that COVID was a lie. My missus knew. We just knew. And I predicted, they'd announced that they were going to start jabbing people on the 6th of January locally in Milton Keynes, was my area. And the moment needles went in, the phone rang off the hook, they were dying. And the mistake that they made there, that again supported my suspicion, was this. When they first rolled out the job, if you cast your mind back, it's only the most vulnerable that are going to need it. Only the most vulnerable, just those over 80. And then they moved the goalpost, didn't they? And they said, and this week, it's just those that are over 70. And then they said, well actually, we can save the lives of the over 60s as well. And they gradually, throughout 2020, went down the age groups, didn't they? Kept, on the back of a constant lie, moving the goalposts. Well, as they went down the age groups, that was who was dying. That was who the phone was ringing for. I remember when they rolled it out to the under 40s, which was so unusual, I had like 4 or 5 people in their 40s in. who'd all been jabbed. Just that month. And to give you an idea of how unusual that was, I do about 150 funerals a year. When I worked for the co-op, I was doing 800 funerals a year in the branch that I was in, a big hub in Northampton off the Barrett Road. And so significantly more. I mean, we had more staff there, so you could do it. But in that 800 deaths, when I cast my mind back, I could count the amount of people under 40 on one hand in a 12-month period. Because it's just so unusual. You don't die under 40 unless it's a drug overdose, young lads in a car accident, or a broken artery before who's committed suicide. That's the people under 40 that die, you know? So for me, I've seen, doing 150 funerals in, I've seen half a dozen in a month during the vaccine rollout, and they were all vaccine deaths. I know they were. So at the beginning of 2021, I watched a program or a documentary from a guy in America called Richard Hirschman, and he talked about clotting, and then there was other reports about clotting in vaccinated people, and we were still seeing young deaths, people that don't normally die, coming through. And then my embalmer came through to see me and he said, I think we've got a problem with the pump. Okay, the embalming pump. So the embalming pump is a pump that pumps formaldehyde around your body. There are two types of embalming. There's post-mortem case, and there's what we call a straight case, someone that hasn't had a post-mortem. So the way it works is this: if you haven't had a post-mortem and you're an expected death, you don't need a post-mortem because they know why you've died. So I would hook up a pump to your carotid artery, we cut halfway through, we put an L-shaped pump down, we tie it up with twine, and we put the pump on. And then they draw the blood out of your body through your heart via a trocar, which is like a big hollow poker, for want of a better word. And that artery pumps the fluid all around your body. And I know when it's gone around your body because it's pink in colour. And it obviously preserves the body, but one of the other qualities is pink. So it puts colour back in you. And you can see when you've done down someone's arm, because their fingertips go slightly pink. And we were struggling to get fluid round people, and he said, I think the pump needs servicing. Well, the pump, this is where being an ex-engineer lent itself to me. He wasn't an engineer, he was an embalmer. But I know there's a pressure bar on there, and it tells me the pressure that this pump is pushing, and it's pushing what it should. So then we had, so 1 pointers, and that being 1 point, ended up 6 pointers because you couldn't get the fluid around them. So you'd have to do the artery under their arm, the radials, and then you'd have to do the ephemeral artery. And normal embalmings where you could do it with one, there ended up 6 pointers. And this is young people who should have good circulatory system that should be, clear. So to cut a long story short, we then had a guy in about mid-2021. He was 30 years old, he was in really good nick, bless him. He looked like a Spartan warrior, he was a real beast, 6.5 foot tall, not an ounce of fat on him. And for those of you who are not yet 30, youth is wasted on the young. But for those of us that have been 30, you'll understand exactly what I mean. He was in really good nick. So he'd had a full post-mortem, and the way that works is they're cut down the middle, they're opened up, they take each organ out, cutting the vessels and arteries on the way out, and then they take blocks and slides and they look at those organs to make sure, or to try and ascertain the cause of death, or they used to, and then they put them back in a bag. The bag is put into your empty cavity and it's sewn back up, and then the body is released to me. Now, if you're doing a straight case where it hasn't had a post-mortem, it's fairly easy. Hooking up to one artery, or even 6, you can make 6 incisions, and it pump it around the body. But if someone's had a post-mortem, clearly their vascular system, that network of vessels, has been very badly compromised, hasn't it? Because all the organs have been cut out. So if I was to connect up there, it would leak out everywhere. So we have to take the bag out, and then you're looking at an empty body cavity, and it is exactly as you imagine it would be. It's just an empty rib cage where you see the inside of someone's spine. And I was always amazed how many people have scoliosis, a twisted spine. And you wouldn't see it in life, but when you look at the inside of them, you can see that. Yeah, it always amazed me. But anyway, so I looked at this guy and we opened him up, and then we start manually targeting the severed arteries around his body with this pump. And to give you an idea, so for the femoral artery, you would see it sitting in the top of his leg, like a cut straw. Some people have an artery like that, like a cow artery we call this. Others have an artery like a pencil, much thinner. They both do the same job. Clearly they work, or they wouldn't have lived that long. But you can see these arteries. Now, when my embalmer's gone to squirt the fluid down this particular lad's femoral artery, it's blocked. So he's took a pair of tweezers and he's grabbed the obstruction in the top of the artery and he's pulled and pulled and pulled, and he's pulled one entire clot out of the whole length of this lad's leg in one piece. And that, for those of you who are obviously not in the trade, that's just unheard of. That's not possible, because a blood clot is very much like jelly. You could break it with your fingers, you can wash it down a plug hole. They're never usually bigger than 20 mil in size, 2 centimetres max. But this came out in one whole piece. And then we looked at his other leg, and that came out in one piece. And in fact, his aorta, that was in the bag of viscera, or giblets for one of the word they use is viscera bag, was about 85% blocked. And this is a guy that's 30 and built like a Spartan. So what's gone wrong? You know, he's had a post-mortem. What is this stuff? I've never seen it before. And my embalmer is British Institute of Embalmer registered, is BIE registered. He's done 25 years. He's never seen it before. So I kind of had an idea of what was going on then. So I pinged an email out to the coroner because I wanted a paper trail, you know. We've got this young lad in, he's come in, he's 30 years old. I know that you did the post-mortem before you released him to us. However, we found he's full of this calamari. What is it? And calamari is the best descriptive name I can give it, based on what it looks like, how it feels, and the consistency of it. And I've reminded myself there. So I've bought these. Each file is what have come out of somebody's neck alone. Pass it round. Feel free to take them out and show people. Obviously don't squeeze it or throw it up in the air, because they're sealed, but they're formaldehyde, and the clots inside are individuals, and this is what is coming out of people. This is why we're seeing record numbers of heart attacks, strokes, and where people are being told they've got lung cancer, for example. The cancer, so I'll get back to the coroner. So the coroner, I've emailed him and I've asked him what is it, and they wouldn't reply to the email. Usually my coroner's good as gold, right up until the last few years, because I've had some tear-ups with them. So the coroner rang me about 4 days later, wouldn't reply to the email, and said to me, "Hi, this is Heather," her name was, one of the coroner's officers. "We spoke to the pathologist, it's about your email." I said, "Oh, okay then." We spoke to the pathologist. He said not to worry and dispose of the samples, and it grows naturally post-mortem. So apparently when you die, your arteries fill up with rubber, just as a matter of course, which is total fucking fantasy and bullshit. Now, when I worked for the co-op for 10 years, 7 of those years, I did working for the coroner on body recovery. So the way that worked, I went in one day and he said, "I've got really good news." I said, "Oh, what's that?" He said, "We've got a new contract." I said, "What's that?" He said, "It's the coroner's contract." And he gave me a mobile phone and he gave me set keys for a brand new van. And he said, "When that phone rings," he said, "you go and pick them up." And I'd only ever done regular funerals. And all of a sudden there I was in the road, 3 o'clock at night, with 2 coffin plates, picking up brain, and it was a right nightmare. But the point being is, for 7 years, I'd looked at the inside and out of people. So I knew what was normal and what wasn't normal. And this isn't normal. And my BIE registered embalmer, who's looked at the inside of people for 25 years, he says it isn't normal. Yet when the coroner is alerted, they won't reply to an email, but they'll tell me down the phone it's normal and to dispose of it, which I know is a lie. So I then emailed the Chief Coroner of England, and I CC'd in Dolores Cahill, Tess Laurie, and a number of other quite high-profile people. And the reason behind that was to put leverage on them to get a response. because you're including other people in that email. And basically said to him, listen, we're getting loads of people in full of these unnatural clots. What is it? What are you doing about it? And I didn't get even a reply. So 3 weeks later, I sent another email saying, just a little heads up, you know, further to my last email, you know, we're all quite keen to know what's going on. And I got a small, short paragraph response that basically said, we follow government policy. So he didn't actually admit anything, but he made a big admission by not admitting anything. So he didn't deny that there were plots, he didn't deny there was an issue, but he said he follows government policy. So in September of 2021, I had a phone call, and it was Mark Sexton, the wonderful Mark Sexton, bless his soul, and he invited me to a meeting in Westminster in a place called Birdcage Walk, and he said there would be other people there, and he felt that my testimony as a funeral director would be helpful to this meeting. So I went. It was I believe it was the 21st of September. No. Yeah, I think it was the 21st of September. It was a 2 o'clock meeting. It was in Birdcage Walk in Boardroom 1. Now, I went down there. I'd had a guy from the SAS reach out to me, and he met me on the outskirts of London and came in on the tube with me. And I was really amazed because he didn't look anything. You know, you think, yeah, clever. Yeah, the most unassuming character you've ever thought, but really they're a deadly weapon, aren't they? But the fact that he took me there kind of tells you about the level of the meeting. The table we sat at was about like that. It was, I've never sat at a table, anything like that. And I remember, for the young lads, do you remember Robert Stevenson's rocket, the locomotive? In this boardroom, there was one of those in a glass case, and I'd never seen anything so beautiful. It was all handmade, and obviously a working model, and that was in this, and it was just the height of opulence. You know, I'd never seen anything like that before. Now, we all sat down, and there were 18 people-ish at this meeting. Most of them I'd never met before. And I remember sitting there and thinking, oh, at last, someone's listening, you know? At last, someone's listening. And I expected them to listen. And the guy, there were supposed to be 2 ministers present. One of them, I've since found out, was Andrew Bridgen, who should have been here today, bless him, and he sends his apologies. But he couldn't make it on that day for personal reasons. But the minister that was in attendance was a guy called Sir Graham Brady. Now, I was unfamiliar with politics at that time and the structure of it. Sir Graham Brady was the commissioner of something called the 1922 Committee. So this is a group of very senior Tory politicians who sit in the background and they hire and fire prime ministers. So he was the commissioner, the boss of this commission, this group of people. So he was 2 pay grades above the Prime Minister. And that blew my mind, because I never knew, I thought the Prime Minister was the man. That's who you vote for, and he isn't. He doesn't run the country. These people do. So Sir Graham sat here, I sat there. There was Anna de Bisseret was next to me, bless her, God bless her soul. Dr. Stephen Frost, Dr. Sam White, Dolores Cahill, Professor Dolores Cahill, Dr. Tess Laurie, Dr. Sukrit Bhakti was at the end via a Zoom call, and a girl called Deborah, who was a homeopathic expert, Philip Hyland, the lawyer, and a barrister called Francis Hoare, who I didn't particularly like. I thought he was not. And there's a reason for that. So about 10 minutes into this meeting, it was being recorded by Stephen Frost, and Francis Hoare said, Sir Graham, I just want to say that these people's opinions are not mine. I'm here in a professional capacity. And he said, this meeting's being recorded, and it's Chatham House rules. So the recording was switched off, because if you'd have seen that recording, it would have ended the whole thing. And I'm very angry with Francis Hoare to this day, because that meeting would have been documented if he hadn't voted his God. So I don't trust him further than I could spit, and that ain't far. Now, I spoke first, and obviously COVID has been an evolving story. As I've learned more as time goes, I mean, I didn't know about the white clots in 2020 because they hadn't even rolled the vaccines out, but it's been an evolving story. And at that time, I sat down and they said, you've got 5 minutes with the minister because the minister's time is precious. Scumbags. I said to him, listen, they faked loads of deaths in 2020, there were no more deaths than normal. And when they rolled the jabs out, people fell over and died. And we found clots in them. And then, that's abbreviated, but I had 5 minutes to say that and choose my words. And then I listened as it went round the table, and everyone else spoke. And they came out with, I was horrified. My arse fell out, I'll be honest with you, because they said that everyone that's been jabbed, if they've had an active ingredient, they've got between 2 and 5 years. There's no cure, they are going to die. I saw reams and reams of evidence taken out and given to Sir Graham Brady firsthand. Now, I'm a people person, and for me, while they were all talking, usually if you picture a big boardroom table, it was a big boardroom, it was probably from here to the bar, just the table. And inevitably, when someone's talking, common courtesy dictates that you focus your attention on them. I could listen and look at Sir Graham because I wanted to look at his face, because his reaction was very telling, and he knew. He was ashen-faced, he was shitting his pants. They want you to be frightened. And let me tell you, these people are shitting their pants. They're frightened to death because we all told him what we'd seen and what was going to happen. And I went there thinking, oh, you've tried on it. I went there thinking, oh, at last someone's listening, and I came away knowing it was actually a deliberate agenda. And now Sir Graham, when it got round past Dolores Cahill and Tess Lorien, they'd all said about the dreadful things that were going to happen. They said about the cancers, they said about the heart attacks and the strokes, the mechanisms of that, in layman's terms, so we could understand. The evidence went over. He openly admitted to a room full of us, it's way, way above my pay grade. There's nothing I can do to stop it. He said, I will try, but I can't promise anything, and nothing's happened. It all unfolded the way it did, and everyone got jabbed and stuck, and the kids, if you were, indoctrinated or coerced or bullied into taking your kids in, and look at what's happened ever since. So he knew, and it's a deliberate agenda. When you look at the Kalergi Plan, Agenda 2030, it's a very real thing, and he knew back in September of 2021. If that was me, I would have stood up there and I would have said no. And I would have pulled Boris's phone out and said, stop it now. I've spoken to experts who are not on the payroll, who haven't got shares in Moderna, like Rishi Sunak, and it should stop. No. And that's what happened. And the rest is history, really. So where are we now? We're still seeing lots of people that are far too young dying. They're dying suddenly. They're dying in numbers to where they've had to hide it. They're having to hide it. How are they hiding it? Cremation paperwork. They pulled the first part in 2021 to protect the NHS. We're just going to streamline it to one doctor. Last year in September, they cancelled the second part, so there is no cremation, no doctor's cremation paperwork now. They're just waving them through. Oh, but we've got a medical referee. It's just a bloke on the phone. There's no checks now. They're waving them straight through. Now, since the tail end of last year, the phone has been ringing. There are two types of death. There's a sudden death and there's an unexpected death. Now, the coroner doesn't have his own funeral directors. He contracts that out to a company who, so say for example, you get home from work and your mum is laying there dead on the floor. She wasn't ill, there were no comorbidities, it's totally unexpected. You would call the police and you would call an ambulance. A doctor or a paramedic would turn up and the police would turn up, and straight away, with no choice, they would call the coroner's team to come and recover your mum and take her to the coroner's office. It doesn't matter what the age is, doesn't matter, it's a sudden death, that's it, could be a murder, could be anything. Now, I'm suddenly getting called to coroner's removals, sudden deaths. And I've probably done about 6 or 8 since the tail end of last year. So I've emailed the coroner and said, you know, why am I getting called to these sudden deaths? You have a funeral director's contracted to do them. Why am I doing them? Oh, it's a new operational directive that was brought in September of last year by government. So the government issued a new operational directive last September around sudden deaths. This is after tweaking the ONS data to hide it. And that operational directive is instructing that there be less referrals to the coroner. On what basis? On the basis of suspicion. So if a copper walks in, he sees a person laying on the floor, and there's no trail of blood, no upturned furniture, and in the opinion of the paramedic and attendants, it looks like a heart attack. That's it, they wave it through. It doesn't even go to the coroner. It's universally accepted there is no better time to do a murder than now. Because you'll get away with it, you'll walk. And so I had one particular girl, she was in her 30s, and this is only a couple of weeks ago. And I got called, and she's laying there on her living room floor, and I know the family because I've done funerals for them. And she's dead. Okay, why am I here? Well, the police said we should call the undertaker. I said, what do you mean? It's a sudden death. She's in her 30s. No, they just said call the undertaker. They said it's, you know, not unexpected. It looks like a heart attack. That's it. They're waving them through, and they're doing that on the back of government policy. And in this email she sent me, she said it's a new operational procedure around sudden deaths, and Thames Valley Police have instructed their officers to act on that and use their discretion. Now, I don't know about you. When the coppers get called and they turn up, there's a dead body laying there, like that little doggy, bless him. That's as much information as they've got. I've yet to see a police officer with a doctorate in pathology and an X-ray vision. But they're waving them straight through there. Why are they doing that? Because every referral of a sudden death is counted. And if all of a sudden there's a massive increase in referrals, and hence sudden deaths, alarm bells would ring, didn't it? So what's the best way to hide that? Is not to count them by not referring in the first place. And they're waving them straight through. And I had a blazing row with the coroner, and then I said, well, what about these clots as well? I said, because this girl went away, so I made a fuss. They picked her up on the Monday, right? From me, the coroner, because I made a fuss. Because the family are coming in on the Monday and they're asking me, do you know why my mum died? No. That's the reality. Why did my mum die at 37? I don't fucking know. So I've made a fuss. The coroner's come to pick her up after a frosty conversation. A couple of days later, the deceased has come back, and I've got what's called a Form 6. They emailed me over the cause of death, pneumonia. So this girl apparently died suddenly from pneumonia she never knew she fucking had at home. It's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. The family know it's bullshit. Now, when we've opened her up, they've asked us to embalm her because she's young and she's got a big social circle and they want to come and see her. We open her up, we take the bag of viscera out, and in the bottom, if you picture it in your mind, there's a rib cage with a spine running up the middle of it, and in the bottom of this rib cage is a pool of blood because it's the lowest point where gravity collects the blood, and that pool of blood is maybe about that circumference and it's about 20 mil deep. At the top of her hips and the bottom of the rib cage, where the lowest point of the body. When my embalmer's clearing out, there's a huge clump of white clot there. There are no veins or arteries in a chest cavity. That's empty. So clearly they've removed these clots, and on the removal of them, they've accidentally dropped a bit back in the cavity that's fell in the bottom, and it's been hidden by the pool of blood. They've gone like that, yeah, we've got it all out, and then they put the bag back in and sewn her up. So that's clear evidence, and I've confronted this coroner. They will not even respond to the email. Why would you not respond to an undertaker making those accusations? They won't reply, they just won't respond. So that tells me all I need to know, and I can tell you they're really, really frightened, and they're in up to there now, aren't they? How long do you keep a secret for before you are considered complicit in the crime? What would be acceptable in a court of law? And if let's say for argument's sake, it all comes out and the truth is told, like thalidomide, it might take 30 years. I don't think we've got 30 years, in honesty, unless we sort it collectively. And the judge says to you, well, why didn't you say anything? You say, well, I thought I might lose my job. Okay. How long is acceptable to keep that secret? Could you say, well, I was under duress for 6 months, or 12 months, or 5 fucking years? Come on. So these people now, and I don't doubt that they're reminded of their complicity to keep them silent. Well, you'll come down with me, and they know they will. They're going to lose their good little number. The money keeps rolling in, this fiat currency, don't it? And it's buying these doctors and these nurses the Porsche box that their missus wouldn't let them have because they got the spare cash now. And when you look at it and you think about it logically, the GPs, right? They were on £10 a jab, tax-free for the first 100, so they could earn £5,000 a week, tax-free. Kids were £12.50. So of course, they've gone, oh, and they can't believe their luck, can they? They're only doing what they're told to do, but that didn't save them in Nuremberg, did it? And now, they're deeply complicit in a crime, especially when they then say to them, you as a GP are responsible. They're all shitting their pants. They're not going to say we've given toxic jabs. So it buys complicity, don't it? What was one of the first acts that Labour did when it got into government? And bear in mind, we're all on our arse economically. Everything is falling apart. Nobody can have a pay rises, pay cuts everywhere, job losses. Who gets the 28% pay rise? Yeah. The doctors. Yeah. How is it possible that they can find that money? Because what does it do? It buys compliance and it buys silence. And when there's a recession, everyone's losing all their shit. A really good number is a really good number, isn't it? And you've got to see it on the arc. You know, there won't be no jab, no job for them, will there? And a good sign of this is the NHS. So this year, 83% of NHS staff refused their COVID jab. People on the front line, allegedly most at risk, dealing with this terrible ongoing pandemic, but 8.3 out of every 10 of them said no thank you. Why is that? So it's clear to me that the narrative has fell over, but we're all slave to the money lender, aren't we? And we've got a lot of good people doing bad things for money. And I get that, and I'm very fortunate in that they haven't closed me down yet. Why haven't they closed me down? Am I controlled opposition? Clearly not. You know, they tried to bum me off. So I started talking about the meeting in Westminster with Graham Brady. Immediately after that fucking meeting, I spilled my guts all over the place. I didn't go to the meeting on the basis of Chatham House rules. Chatham House rules, for those of you who are unaware, and I didn't know, means that you can criminally conspire with your co-conspirators in that room and it doesn't leave the room. Well, that's fine if you want to talk about forging foreign policy or a business deal or, you know, all the things that fucking Starmer doesn't do, clearly, to get a better deal. We're talking about the lives of people and medical professionals telling you that the cancer rates are going to go through the roof, the heart attacks are going to go through, and the clots, and they did nothing. So I spilled my guts, and I told everyone that would listen, and I've done that ever since, non-stop. Now, about November, end of November, I took a phone call from one guy, and it was an older gentleman, very well spoken. He said to me that he was a British intelligence officer, a comms officer, not 007. Usually someone would say, yeah, I'm, you know, secret intelligence. I said, yeah, and I'm Batman. You know, but he was very polite, very well spoken. He obviously withheld his number, and he was really, really compelling. And he said to me, everything you've said is true. He said, you will be targeted because you are a person of interest. And he'd seen my name in what he called dispatches. So his job was passing information from one department to another. And he went into great detail telling me about how they're bringing these guys in and the fact that they are here for an agenda. So I listened to him for about half an hour, 40 minutes, and I come off the phone and I was like, fuck. You know, what do you do? You know, all right, I worked on the door when I was in my 20s, I'm now 57. I'm 20 years past my best. What am I going to do? So I was going to work, wiping the door around, and, you know, emptying the kettle, and because gone are the days where these people come for you with a silenced Luger and all that bollocks. It's done with toxins. It's done with energy guns and stuff like that, where they burn you, they microwave you from a distance. I never knew. I've seen the patents for the technology. Like weather manipulation, everyone people, oh, it's conspiracy. There are 250 patents plus. It isn't conspiracy, it's a real thing, but we've all been so busy living our own lives in our own little bubbles, I certainly haven't looked any deeper, you know? So anyway, 3 weeks later after getting this phone call, I suddenly felt really ill and breathless. I felt ill. I felt that I'd been burnt or poisoned. Now, I used to be a smoker. I used to get chest infections all the time, and when my son was born, it was one of the motivators, that and work and doing the job that I do, to pack up. Because here I was washing and dressing people younger than me with a cigarette patch on their arm and nicotine on their fingers. It's not rocket science. And there are words that I live by. It's a Latin phrase, it's temet nosci, it means know thyself. And what it basically equates to is, you can bullshit anyone, but you're always honest with yourself, aren't you? We all tell the best stories to other people in our time, but you're honest with yourself. And I knew if I didn't pack up, I would be laying on that table and I wouldn't see my boy grow up. So, you know, I kind of packed up smoking, but I knew what a chest infection felt like because I'd had numerous chest infections from smoking. I was living on an inhaler and stuff like that, so I knew that this wasn't an illness. I knew that I'd either been burnt or poisoned, and anyway, my SATs got lower, my oxygen saturation levels went down to about 78, which is not conducive to life. And I was obviously at that point, at the end of 2021, last week in December, in touch with a lot of doctors, so I was very fortunate in that I had a lot of support. One of them ran an ambulance, which I didn't really want, because I know what they're doing in the hospital by this time. And a paramedic turned up with two big lads, who were obviously the muscle for, you know, moving people about. And straight away she ripped into me. Oh, because they looked at your vaccine status to see who you are. They knew they were on fucking standby to come get me. You know, they knew what they'd done. And anyway, it's people like you keeping it alive, and you're so selfish, and this, that, and the other. And I said, hold on a minute. I said, you know, between gasps, I said, I'm an undertaker. I fucking nose dying. And then, he didn't say a fucking word. So anyway, they took me to hospital in the ambulance, and on the way down on oxygen, and I feel fine on oxygen. And she said, well, as soon as we get you in, we'll ventilate you straight away. I said, no, don't bother. She said, why? I said, because I feel all right on oxygen. I said, it'll blow my lungs out, because I would educate myself by then. So we got to hospital, and I went into triage, and I was seen immediately because there was no one else in there, not one patient. And this was at a time when they were saying how they were overrun. And I've on my phone, I've got 112 nurses' details where they all rang me up to tell me, yes, you're right, yes, you're right, help us. Some of them have sobbed down the phone. So I kind of knew what was happening. I went in there anyway. She said, I want you to do a PCR test. And I was like, no. Oh, will you do a lateral flow? I said, I'm not having anything up my nose or in my body. I'll spit on a stick. So she lateral flow, 3 lots of spit, put it in her machine. She said, no, you haven't got COVID. I said, fucking no. I said, I feel like I've been burnt or poisoned. So she went away. A few minutes later, she came back and said, well, we're going to put you on a COVID ward anyway, just to be sure. And I knew them because I'd had the heads up off the comms officer. So I went into this COVID ward, dark old place, I tell you, grim. 4 beds, 2 guys opposite me. One was 2 years older than me. Another guy was in his early 70s, and they're both on the old, it was like a posh full mask, CPAP it's called, I didn't know at that time. But they were both on CPAP. And this was early hours of the morning, so anyway, I got my head down as best I could, and I was frightened because I knew they were coming after me. And in the morning, 9 o'clock sharp, this guy sat on the end of the bed, tanned, good looking, 55, consultant. You know, one of those annoyingly good looking blokes that you just hate to looking at. Anyway, he said, I'm here to save your life from COVID. That was the line that he led with. So I was like, okay. I said, have you looked at my notes? I said, because I ain't got COVID. I said, I've had 3 of your tests. These are the tests that you're putting the elderly on palliative care and locking them in side rooms until they die. And he lost it straight away. That air of confidence just went, evaporated. Because he knew at that point, oh fuck, he knows what he's talking about. And he said, well, we just have to be sure, we have to be sure. And I said, all right. I said, so how are you going to save me then from COVID I ain't got? He said, well, we want to start you on remdesivir. So most people didn't know about remdesivir at that point. You know, that was the only antiviral drug that they offered COVID patients, right? Now let me tell you a little bit about the saving grace. So do you remember Rainer Fulmick did the grand jury? I don't know how many of you are aware of that, but he...
Is he still in prison, John?
Yeah, he's a political prisoner, yeah, because they know he's told the truth. So the way that works, he scoured Europe and globe to get experts in every different field. Me as an undertaker, doctors, nurses, haematologists, you name it, and he's rounded them all up and he's recorded their testimony in legal format so it can be presented as a case, and it was called the grand jury. Now, and he called me to do that. Now, when he called me to do that, I got a date, and I was given a time slot. Now, you're expected to testify for no more than an hour, and the time slot I was given was 6 till 9 o'clock. Now, I've never been a particularly lucky fella, so I logged on at 6 o'clock, and only to find out I'm the one that's on last. So what that meant was I had 2 hours to listen to the 2 expert witnesses that were on before me. And one of them, the second one, was an expert on remdesivir. So there I was, fully armed, because I'd soaked it all up. So remdesivir was last used in Africa by Anthony Fauci. Now, Fauci took it into Africa and PCR tested asymptomatic babies. Sound familiar? Asymptomatic? PCR tested them, and when he got a positive test, he filled them up with remdesivir. The antiviral treatment, 53% of them died from multiple organ failure in Africa, where life is cheap, before he was told to get out, they fucked him off. That's the history of remdesivir, and that was the practice run for COVID. And you remember, they wouldn't let anyone else use anything, would they? All these other cures and ivermectin and poo-pooed it all. But they stuck remdesivir in people. Now, as a funeral director, when I was picking people up throughout 2020 that had been treated with remdesivir and gone on to die, there was a couple of things that stuck in my mind. Number one was, nobody ever went into hospital with COVID, not one. They went in with a water infection or a chest infection, and they spam tested them while they were in there until they got a positive test, and then they moved them on a COVID ward. Then they treated them for that COVID, and then they went on to die. And when I was picking them up, they were all in sealed body bags early on, till they run out of body bags. And the one thing that struck me was how full the body bag was with fluid. Now, we've got a lot of water inside us, but this was, I was picking people up in body bags and they were saying it was COVID. Don't open the bag. This is just before I opened it and washed and dressed them anyway. And it was half full of fluid, edema. And I'd never ever seen that. I'd seen the bigger the person, the more fluid they have inside them, and inevitably you get a bit more leakage. But this was people that I was picking up, and the body bag was half full. Halfway up their body. I'd never seen that, and it made them incredibly heavy. You can imagine going to a mortuary and they come out with a tray on wheels from the fridge, and I put my stretcher up alongside, and then I have to pull them across. One, you have to do it incredibly carefully, because if you tear that bag, there's 30 litres of body fluid going everywhere, and it's COVID. So I was really, and I remember thinking, fuck, what is this COVID doing? This was before I knew about COVID. And I've since found out, these are the people that went in with a chest infection, went in with a water infection, and they gave them a PCR test until they got a positive result. Now, Kerry Mullis said it doesn't test for COVID and no more than 25 cycles. At Milton Keynes Hospital, they're running 45 cycles to generate a positive test, because then they get paid the big money. They put them on ventilation because they get paid the big money. They give them remdesivir because they get paid the big money. The remdesivir. So Google side effects of remdesivir. Common side effects: wheeziness, tight chest, difficulty breathing, difficulty swallowing, kidney function, liver function. The whites of your eyes turn yellow because your organs struggle to cope with the poison. So when your kidneys fail, your body can't process fluid. Where does that fluid go? It fills you up. And they blew these people up like balloons. They were crying yellow tears. It was coming out of their nose. Even their ears were leaking. And if you picture it, if I'm pulling someone's mum across, I'm trying to be as gentle as I can, because quite often elderly people have fragile skin anyway. Those of you in the caring profession will tell you. So I'm doing it really gently. And you would still leave a perfect imprint of your hand in their arm, because they were bursting with edema, because their kidneys have been killed with the remdesivir, and their lungs have been blown out with the ventilation. And because their kidneys couldn't process fluid, they filled up and they drowned. And there's your respiratory illness. There's your COVID. And that's what it was. So I put it to this consultant sitting on the end of the bed. Tell me the clinical benefits of remdesivir to me as a respiratory patient, because I didn't have COVID. Their tests proved that, but I was struggling to breathe. So I acknowledged I'm a respiratory patient. Show me the benefits clinically of remdesivir while I look up at the side effects. And straight away, do you know what he did? He fucked off quick. He didn't even say a fucking word or engage any further from that point. And this is a respiratory consultant who told me I would die without the medicine. And the two guys opposite me took that medicine, and I listened to them choking to death for 2 nights on CPAP as the nurses took them shots of morphine, shots of morphine, shots of morphine. I'm not a doctor, I'm an undertaker. But if you're struggling to breathe and they're feeding you endless supply of morphine, you are fucking brown bread, mate. And that's what happened. These people would never have made it out. So 4 hours later, after this fucking rat fucked off, and I call him a rat because he is, and I'm telling him he was a rat if he was here. A girl came in, painfully skinny. She was a good looking girl, under 40, blonde hair, sat on the end of the bed, but she was like that. She was nervous. And remember, I worked on the door 7 years. I'm not fucking stupid. I can tell you if someone's nervous. She couldn't make any eye contact. She was like this. I'm here to save your life from COVID. The exact same fucking line, word for word, from the Book of Coercement, to convince you of the need to take the poisons. So I had the same conversation. I said, okay, have you looked at my notes? I haven't got COVID, I've had 3 of your tests. These are the tests that you're putting people on palliative care on, the back of. Tell me the clinical benefits of what you're going to give me. What are you going to give me for COVID I haven't got? Well, we just want to be sure. Well, they want to be sure, don't they? I said, what are you going to give me to be sure then? She said, we want to give you 2 drugs we want to try. I said, what are they then? She said, one was baricitinib. Write it down or memorise it, baricitinib. And the other one was a drug called tocilizumab. And what saved my life was the heads up from the British intelligence guy, and I took my tablet in so I could write these things down and then I could look them up. So I said, all right. I said, well, you tell me the clinical benefits while I look up the side effects. Oh look, wheeziness, difficulty breathing, difficulty swallowing, kidney function, liver function. No thank you. Why would I want that? Oh, you'll die without them. I said, well, I'll fucking die then. Fuck it. And making that stand when you feel terrible, and I fucking felt terrible. Whatever it was they belted me with, it was a good belt. But I knew in my heart that what they wanted, what they needed, was the death of a prominent anti-vaxxer from COVID. So I knew if I never got out then, I wouldn't get out. I wouldn't get out. I knew they were going to nail me. So I of course had my tablet, and they couldn't come and snatch it. Because the other lads that were struggling to breathe, and they were telling their wives how much they loved them, and and I was fucking saying, you've got to get me out, So the respiratory consultant then, his name is Mr. Darapalli. Mr. Darapalli was his name, and he rang my wife and he tried to convince her to section me in. Yeah, they were interviewing me to see if I was mentally unstable. And to move forward, let me be clear, if ever you are being weighed up, you have to stay cool. Because the moment you become animated, you give them all the bullets they need to fire at you, and then they section you and they do what the fuck they want. So I know my missus, I can trust her, and she can trust me, and I said, don't fucking listen to them, you insist that I want to come home. I've got a good network of doctors. I had a doctor that agreed to advocate for me, and this Dr. Chan and Mark Sexton came down to the hospital and they bailed me out. But it took 3 hours of arguing passively for them. Oh, they were restraining me and everything. I was trying to get up and walk out. Oh, you'll die, you die. And my son, who was 11 at the time, he recorded the phone call. And in it, the consultant, he identifies himself and he says to my missus, he would die within minutes of leaving the ward without oxygen. Fucking hell, it's a miracle. Here I am. How is it possible? This is a respiratory consultant. So I know what they've done. I know what they've done, and I got out of my recovery. I made a full recovery, but even then, they were clutching at straws. So I took a phone call 4 weeks later. I just got back to work, and it was BBC Three Counties Radio. We want to talk to you about your COVID experience. I said, you don't? They said, I do. Really want to. We'd love to know more, because they thought I was going to say, yeah, it's a real thing, and yeah, I was wrong, and no, I fucking knew I weren't wrong. I knew more than ever. So I told him the story that I told you, and he said, just give me a minute, I want to speak to my producer. And he went away, and he came back, and he said to me, well, what we'll do is we'll come to the funeral home, he said, and we'll pre-record an interview. And I said, yeah, what I'll do is I'll film that to keep it well balanced. And that was it, I never heard from him again. So I know. Now, being in there and watching these people whispering to each other, because they know you know. They fucking know. I had 2 nurses come up to my bedside and thank me for what I was doing, coming off other wards. And when Mark Sexton came up to get me, in the lift there was a nurse there, and she cried next to him and said, please save us. So they know what's going on. Most of the girls, I've got over 100 on my phone that have reached out to me after I made an appeal for anyone to get in touch. Now I would never betray anyone who placed their trust in me. If these people want to speak out, and they know who they are, it's down to them to get a backbone and a moral compass and not be afraid and just speak out. And if they'd fucking done that, this would all be over. When I first started shouting, don't think that the things that I talk about in my funeral home are not happening every other funeral home. I've spoken to them. I spoke to one girl, rang me up, tail end of 2021, sorry. She said to me, 7 funeral homes they've got in London. She said, yeah, we're seeing exactly the same thing. Exactly. I've had them tap me on the shoulder. Oh, well done, it needed to be said. Doctors, nurses, and I think once I started speaking out, I started then getting people engaging with me. Not your average Joe Blogs. Military, politicians. I've had 4 peers ring me up at the funeral home asking to speak to me. That's the most fucking bizarre shit ever if I'm a conspiracy theorist. They fucking all know. They all know. So where is it going to go forward from here? Well, they're actively hiding the excess death rate now. Predominantly there's 2 causes for the deaths. There's vaccination, clearly, and they're presented as heart attack, stroke, lung cancers. So the difference in the cancer that I'm seeing is this. Pre-COVID, I would get people come to me, and it's me all the way through, from the first phone call I take from usually a tearful, upset family member. I go out to their house or I invite them in. I arrange things with them. I do it on the funeral. On the day I direct, my missus drives the hearse. So it's me all the way through. So you build a relationship with that family. And to be honest with you, I personally think that's the best way to do it. When I work for the co-op, you call a call centre, 2 strangers come out, they pick your mum up, you never see them again. You go in and see another person, then on the day it's another team. There's no, you know, and if they give any sort of instruction, Nan always had a tissue in her right sleeve. Do you know what? I fucking go and put a tissue in the right sleeve. They don't tell someone who then tells a call centre. So the way that I do it is the right way to do it, because there's continuity there. So you build a rapport with that family, and during cancer patients, when they lost their mum from cancer, at some point, because I'm a decent fucking human, I would say to them, so what happened to mum? And they would tell you mum's cancer story. And that story would be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years long sometimes. Now, vaccinated people are coming in having had cancer 3 weeks. From asymptomatic to dead. Because you don't know you've got cancer unless you feel fucking ill. Then you go to the doctors and you start down that path, don't you? These are people that actually felt fine. 3 weeks later, they're dead. And I'm not talking about someone in their 70s or 80s, in their 30s, 40s, where they've got some fitness and a bit of fight left in them. It's all gone. 16 weeks, 12 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. I'm picking up 30-year-olds off their living room floor because the coroner's not interested now. And that's where we are. So they said 2 to 5 years post-vaccine. It started at the beginning of 2021. We're in 2025, so it's 4 years on. We're in the 5th year, but 4 years have passed this January. And the numbers are ramping up to the stage they can't record coroner's referrals now. They've had to, a new government thing where we're not going to refer them all. Why are they not going to refer them all? Because they're dying. They don't want to count. They don't want to count it. The ONS data, it is what it is. So I know when I first spoke out 4 or 5 years ago, I had to think very carefully, and not for not obvious reasons. You know, I borrowed 35 grand. I got very successful funeral directors. But what is success? Is it money? No, I'm by far the cheapest in my area. People often think you're cutting corners if you're cheap. It's just I can't. There to exploit people. Really appreciate it. I really feel that I'm happy. Yeah, we've now got a fabulous guy coming up. I'm not going to make a total abortion of trying to pronounce his name, but he's a lovely fella. You'll have seen him openly berate Matt Hancock in the tube station. There he is, there he is. So please give him even half the warm welcome. It's wonderful. Come on, mate.
Into that at the beginning, Andrew, who's Andy Bridges. I've got bloody blind. Andy Bridges, I'm trying to do this one. Andy Bridges is not here. I'm going to give him a plug as well tonight.
Yeah, cool.
Because
cool.
we need Hancock in court, we need that bastard in prison. So that's what
So I will say, guys, when I said 2 to 5 years, that's only if you've had an active ingredient. And let me elaborate, because I don't want anyone who's injected to be full of despair. The fact, if you've been vaccinated, you haven't died already, is very good. That's a clear thing. Early on, they put lots and lots of placebos into people. Why did they do that? I hear you asking. It's very simple. It's to recruit you as an advocate. Let me explain. If I inject you with a placebo, what adverse reaction are you going to suffer? Nothing. So then you go home and you tell everyone how wonderful it is, and they get you on shot number 4 or 5, or the weight loss one, or the shingles one, or the anti-cancer one, or the endless raft of mRNA that they're rolling out now. Don't do any. Yes.